Welcome to the Patriot Perspective. My name is Gregory Lykov, and I'm joined here with Ofer Dar.
Hello, everybody, and thank you guys so much for the recent influx and support.
And, today is a very wonderful day because one of, or a few of actually, my articles did very well in the Gateway Pundit, and that's why we have a new viewership here. So, Ofer, let's get started. We have a lot of things to talk about. This podcast, we're planning on covering the Nancy Pelosi insider trading, not training. The corrupt Democrats in Congress who are basically committing election fraud on a regular basis, and how 15 of them got arrested in southern Texas recently, and how I was the first reporter to cover it in national media, and of course, the current situation in Alaska with Russia and the US finally meeting there. Let's get started. I'm excited. I know Ofer's excited. So, Ofer, I'm going to start off with asking you just a few basic questions. How was your weekend? How were the videos? Any of them succeed? Any of them fail because of the new information with Alaska?
Yeah, they're pretty much doing really well now because there's a lot of attention on Ukraine. And speaking on that matter, on August 15th, it's going to be very interesting to see what develops. I'm going to keep a keen eye on the meeting between Putin and Trump. They're supposed to serve as the meeting spots. So it's going to be surreal because honestly, since 2021, there's never been like a direct meeting between a Russian leader and an American leader. And between Trump and Putin, the last time was in 2019. So this is like a once in a generation event. So I'm very excited for it.
Definitely. And we have seen that over time, the war in Ukraine has been talked about less and less under the Trump administration, almost as if he was drifting further from it and further from that conflict. But now we see that there's finally being something done here, which is a huge deal. I mean, we can see a peace deal be between two of the biggest nations in the Eastern Baltic region. So it would be really, truly something extraordinary. But I wrote a few articles this weekend also discussing the situation with the Nobel Peace Prize and how even if Trump won the Nobel Peace Prize, he shouldn't take it. And what I mean by that is because let's say Trump goes through with it and ends the war between Russia and Ukraine. At that point, the Nobel Committee, I don't see a reason why they can deny Trump the Nobel Peace Prize anymore. They would be very much politically pressured to do so on the Republican side. Obviously, the Democrats would be doing the opposite. And since the Nobel Committee is mostly filled with Democrat, liberal, progressive leaders, then they would obviously be skewed towards one side. But even if Trump won the Nobel Peace Prize, he should refuse it because at this point, the Nobel Peace Prize has been anything but a prize for peace. We have seen people like Jimmy Carter win it, Barack Obama 3 weeks into his presidency for doing absolutely nothing. Actually, what he did do 3 weeks into his presidency is not allow the Green Revolution in Iran to take place, which was, as I'm sure Ofer knows, the number one pro-democracy movement in Iran for the last 50 years, ever since the current regime gained power. And we have also seen Yasser Arafat, who is a terrorist himself and who, is directly to blame for thousands of Israeli deaths and thousands of Jewish deaths. For civilian deaths, for doing absolutely nothing in the Second Intifada. He was the same guy who refused a peace deal with Israel and a two-state solution. That guy received the Nobel Peace Prize for negotiating with Jimmy Carter. So, it's really shocking to me that this committee still stands here today as, the sign of peace throughout the world. But Ofer, what are your thoughts on it? What are your thoughts about, people like Barack Obama and Jimmy Carter and Yasser Arafat winning the prize?
Those are all good examples of people that like you go through their track record and it's pretty funny that they actually ended up getting the Peace Prize. I mean, you look at like Obama, for instance, and look at his legacy, what he caused during his 8 years in office. He was responsible for the massive surge in troop deployments in 2011 when ISIS started, and he deployed forces to Syria in a significant degree for the first time because previously it was more so just in Iraq. But he also increased troop deployments in Iraq, and the war dragged on up until 2017, 2018, when ISIS was once again further diminished in its power. You
Hmm.
look at what he did in Yemen, consistent drone strikes over there. the most egregious example of Obama's activities, the overthrow of Gaddafi in Libya,
Of
and then the
course.
full-scale civil war that followed. Hillary Clinton very famously said that we saw and he died. So she was just laughing about the fact that she backed the assassin. The aftermath was even worse, and Libya became the number one open air slave market in the entire world as a result of the violence. So that's hilarious. And it's all because of like identity politics. That's why they gave it to him. And furthermore, Yasser Arafat, like you mentioned him, if you understand like the history of the PLO, then throughout the 60s and 70s, they were responsible for dozens of plane hijackings. And they took like literal people that, regardless of their nationality, they were just like French, British, etc., and took them hostage, took them to countries in Africa, Uganda, whatever it may be, and killed a lot of them in the process. So he actually pioneered for the first time international terrorism. And a lot of the terrorists that came later, they maybe didn't agree with his ideology, but they looked at his strategies and they replicated them in order to increase their own efficacy. That's what happened with the hijackers on 9/11, for instance. So it's just hilarious that, the Nobel Peace Prize name has been tainted so much by the previous patrons and the previous winners. So yeah, I mean, I would just take thing, but yeah, it has no real value. What matters is what Trump actually gets accomplished.
I agree with you. And we look, you can hate Trump. You can hate him for his policy. You can hate him because he's a divisive president. All of that may be true in your world. But the truth is that Trump, by far, in the last 5 decades, has been the most peaceful president the US has ever seen. He has ended the most conflicts, ended the most wars, and it's truly extraordinary what he has done. We see that just last week he ended the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan, which is a huge, huge
Yeah.
issue that has been stemming for decades. We have seen that he ended the conflict between Cambodia and Thailand, which is amazing. He has ended the conflict between the world and Iran's nuclear weapons. He has ended the conflict between the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many of these examples. I listed maybe half of them that it's so surprising that someone like this is still hated by the world. And I still talk to people who still don't believe that Donald Trump should get the Nobel Peace Prize. You see, the prize is meant to be given for peace, not for being divisive, not for being any other element. That has nothing to do with the prize. It's for creating world peace. And that's what Donald Trump has clearly done. There's no denying it. He has created peace through strength, and he was the only president in modern day history to do it. And that's amazing. Like it's truly wonderful. And I'm sure like I didn't go into Trump's term expecting him to accomplish any of this. I did not think it would work. I didn't think, his first term was obviously a success in this part, but in his second term, this being this peaceful, creating this much world peace is just insane to me. I wanted to hear your thoughts on it over.
Look, he has a vested interest in securing certain agreements when it aligns with American soft power interests, and then also for his own personal agenda of just appearing as if he's making peace, which he actually is in many cases, like you listed. Now, it's far more complicated than just like saying that one man himself would be able to stop everything. But like for instance, in Armenia and Azerbaijan, that's a very good example because you look at an area that's been under turmoil for 30 years on and off. And then obviously in 2023, you had this massive offensive by Azerbaijan. And at that point, the United States identified its interest, and that would be reconciliation between those two countries in order to create a stalwart in the Caucasus region to counter Russian influence and Iranian influence. And now they're going to build, quite literally, the Zangezur corridor, which is going to connect between Azerbaijan and Turkey. And all the oil, natural gas, highways are going to pass through there. It's going to be amazing on an economic standpoint for the region. And the United States is going to have a contract. They're going to have exclusive ownership rights over the corridor. So that's absolutely massive, not just because of the way in which it stops bloodshed, but because it improves America's standing. And that's something very similar to what we saw brokered in Cambodia and Thailand. The United States, as we know, they are huge economic partners with Cambodia, and then they're very strong military partners with Thailand. So they have competing like relations with both sides. And naturally, they want to ensure that there's stability there that remains in order to use both of them as a counterweight against China. So the fact that they in Malaysia were able to work together and stop the conflict, and the fact that the current administration in Thailand is actually pretty pro-Western, pro-America, in contrast to the military, that's actually a big deal in the conflict against China. So it's all a part of like a bigger chessboard. And not only is Trump doing this to save lives, but it's also done in many cases in order to promote America's interests, which is something that we've seen it manifest numerous times, like you listed.
Definitely. Yeah, and we see that there has been ongoing conflicts that have not been solved. Obviously, the biggest of them being the Russia-Ukraine war, but also we see the situation in Gaza with Israel that has not been solved. There has been steps taken this week, though, to solve them. Obviously, as I'm sure all of you know, Netanyahu, the current prime minister of Israel, decided to move forward with a full plan on really continuing the offensive in Gaza and continuing to make sure that Hamas is fully eradicated. That is very big news, and that is wonderful news, if you ask me. That should have been done a long time ago, but again, because of mounting political pressure, Netanyahu is not able to do so, both internal and external political pressure. And now we see countries like Canada and the UK and France threatening to call or use their leverage of recognizing the Palestinian state and recognizing the PLO as an actual governing body. They are threatening that against Netanyahu's plan to, continue the offensive in Gaza. I find that ridiculous. Just a few weeks ago, Canada committed over $10 million to the PLO, which you explained is a terrorist organization and is a registered terrorist organization according to the United States. So the fact that we have a quote unquote ally committing money to put money into the PLO, which is a registered terrorist organization, is highly concerning. I wanted to get your thoughts on generally the relations that we have with countries like Canada, the UK, and France, and how this rift apart from Israel would affect the rift apart between these countries and the United States, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I see what you're like referring to, and it's actually gotten worse now because Australia, Anthony Albanese, he announced that Australia is going to recognize the state of Palestine,
Yeah, and
and
just
yeah,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I was actually the first person to say that this would happen. I said it months ago in m one of my articles in the Jewish News Syndicate. I'll attach it below.
nice.
That's exactly what I said, and no one believed it. But look what happened.
Yeah,
Continue.
when all the floodgates are open, so it's not going to stop with Australia, obviously. New Zealand, Spain already has done it, I believe, or they're in the process of doing so.
Hmm.
All of like the Western European countries are in the process, and even Norway, they divested from a lot of Israeli companies recently, so they're taking even further action. What you were saying about the PLO is true, and it's actually been the case for like 30, 35 years that
Yeah,
Western countries fund the PLO. And this is done as a way to create what they believe is a viable Palestinian political option that can act as a counterweight to Hamas because they are worried that Hamas time during the Intifadas was gaining traction with the population. So they wanted to give the PLO the resources in order to make them dependent on the West so then they could become moderates and then they could obviously defeat Hamas militarily. And so that's what's continuing to go on today. It's what the EU does. The EU has been doing it for years now, funneling money into Gaza under the auspices of it being, Palestinian Authority money, but then it goes to Hamas because Hamas is the governing body in Gaza, and then they could shore it off for whatever needs they have. So yeah, with the PLO, that's something that continues to happen, and it's going to actually increase now with these EU countries. This idea that there is a legitimate state in Palestine, and Mahmoud Abbas, he might in the next UN General Assembly claim that there is an official state of Palestine, which on its surface level would not mean much because the political situation has not changed over there. But then that would give further momentum for other countries to recognize it and provide funding to the PA. And yeah, you could say now, like directly, they don't necessarily have a armed wing that's doing it as much because Hamas is doing it for the most part. But I should know that there is a group called the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, which is the military wing of Fatah, which is the
yeah,
dominant party in the PLO, and they do actually fight Israel in the war in Gaza, and they do still engage in like militant terrorist activity in the West Bank. So they exist, and they would receive some of that money like by extension. So it's not completely clean either.
yeah. And obviously, any money going to the PLO or PA is directly being funneled in some sort of way to Hamas because Hamas is currently the governing body of Gaza. So it's impossible to have them completely out of the mix because even if, let's say, Israel manages to eradicate Hamas's authority in Gaza, they will still, those members of Hamas will transition into members of the PLO or PA, the next governing body of Gaza. So that will again make that governing body another terrorist organization. So it's not going to be any different. All of these, look, the PLO is not any less radical than the Hamas. They just like to think they are. In their charter, it still says that, Jews don't have any claim to the land of Israel, and the Palestinian mission with resistance is to fight militarily the people of Israel and until the Palestinians get all of their land back. That's what they claim. And when you are negotiating with someone who can't negotiate, when you're negotiating with terrorists, there's no negotiating to be done. It doesn't work. So eventually, in my perspective, even if there will be a new PLO or PA that's going to govern the West Bank, or, well, currently what? The PLO is governing the West Bank, I believe, right?
The PLO, or not specifically the PLO, because the PLO, it's an organization that multiple parties are within.
Yeah.
But the party, Fatah, it's the number one party in the Legislative Assembly.
Hmm.
And in addition, the president of the PA is a member of that party, and he's the one who appoints the cabinet.
Hmm.
Because even though Hamas won the 2006 elections, afterwards there was like a civil war, and then
Yeah.
he dissolved the new government that Hamas led, and he created his own one unilaterally, so without any sort of like democratic initiative. So yeah, like in the West Bank, they have complete control. The PA's governing institutions in Gaza, they have to go through Hamas because Fatah has no military control over there.
Exactly. Yeah, and like I don't know, I'm just any plan for Gaza to be self-governed again will just result in other terrorist attacks. I don't believe that there will be ever a plan to have Gaza actually governed independently with independent democratic elections because again, 57% of all Gazans still support Hamas. So when you have more than half of the population supporting Hamas, then they're electing another Hamas in the next election. It's obvious. So, I mean, in general, I obviously, the two-state solution is, in my perspective at least, the only way to go about it. There could never be a one-state solution. It's never going to work internationally, all of that. But at this point, I'm not seeing it in the near future. I don't know about you, Ofer.
Yeah, because when you look at the Israeli security conception, they're not going to allow anything like that. They're going to, over time, gradually increase autonomy. But first, Netanyahu like literally laid it out, his plan, which is a complete military occupation, but doing so in steps. So there's always going to be room in between for additional negotiations with for a hostage swap. But the overarching hope is to create a new civilian administration that is neither Hamas or the Palestinian Authority. And when people would ask, okay, then what's going to take over? Then a good sort of beginning point would be this individual called Yasser Abu Shabab. He's a clan leader in southern Gaza who already receives illicit support from the Israelis. And he's already opening up his own like area in Rafah as a safe zone, and he's bringing his family there. So that's going to be a basis. They're going to go to the clan leaders directly, that leaders of the families, and try to get them through bribes and through like support materially to be sort of dependent on Israel. And then from there, it's going to be a new administration that has no connection to any of the previously existing groups. That's the route that they're taking.
But do you think that there will ever be a new administration that governs the same people who voted for those Hamas leaders in the 2006 election that is completely separate from the Hamas or PLO governing bodies? Like, how can there ever be a totally new administration with no connections? I don't believe like
Well,
that.
it couldn't be democratic. That's the thing. Like it would have to just be embraced from the top down. Like it would have to be unilaterally put upon them. And then there would have to be a strong internal security mechanism. That's the only way it would work because
So
your
it would
concern is
not.
very legitimate.
Yeah, so it wouldn't
Yeah.
even be 100% its own like governing body is what you're trying to say is so that what happened in from 2006 to 2023 would have never happened like in the near future again with Hamas because clearly it was a big failure when the
Yeah.
Palestinians got their own governing body practically in every sort of way their own state other than actually having the label of state because they refused it. When they had all of those options they clearly messed it up in forming terrorist attacks. So uh, I don't believe they deserve another chance. I mean, after killing however many innocent people they killed in the last 16 years. And I'm sure, Ofer, you don't think so either. But realistically, we're going to eventually get to a point where the international community is going to pressure Israel into a two-state solution
Yeah.
because I believe the US also understands that that's the only way to go about it. We have to have eventually some sort of two-state solution. But even if, let's say, the Palestinians got a two-state solution today, do you think that they would accept it based on their past refusals?
Well, it depends on what that entails because, for instance, Hamas, their official stance now, and it probably is legitimate, and I'll explain why. They're saying that they would agree to what's called a hudna for 10 years between Israel
Yeah.
and the Hamas forces, as long as Israel withdraws away from all of Gaza and the West Bank. And that would give them what they need to like build up for the next stage of attacks to take over the rest of Israel. But that's their like temporary position. So they would agree to it. Even Abbas would agree to it because then it would give him legitimacy as like a head of state. But the thing is, Israel will never agree to it because what does a state actually mean? It means they control their own borders and they control their own security. And Israel, they might let over time, over years, the Gazans and Palestinians in certain areas control over their education or control over their economy, but controlling the borders and controlling the security are non-negotiables after what's occurred in recent years because Israel controls the border crossings where all the materials go in, and they also go inside of those regions to fight against any sort of militant activity. And if there's a real state, you can't necessarily do that because they have protections of a state and they have their own sovereignty. So that's
Yeah.
why I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon.
Of course. And look, again, to reiterate this point, for whatever over 17 years or whatever since the 2006 2005 elections, we have seen that Hamas has unilaterally like ruled Gaza itself. It didn't have a real intervention with Israel. It practically was able to make all of their own rules, and it was practically its own state in many ways, other than obviously border was run by Israel and other areas. But this clearly failed greatly. So we can't have the same mistake twice. And I hope the Israeli government understands that. I believe they do. I'm looking to see when a new election will finally be called for Netanyahu. If he will be re-elected, what will happen with that? It's very interesting internally with Israel, with the political situation there. But I would love to get into it, but we kind of have to transition into a new
Yeah.
discussion, and uh, that is the discussion about what happened this weekend with my articles. So there, I actually released a few stories about severe corruption that was going on in South Texas. Obviously, in our few interviews ago, we interviewed Jay Furman, who is a wonderful candidate for Congress. Wonderful interview. That was truly like one of our favorites. We always discuss it now. It's just so great. And we interviewed him, but he's not the only candidate that faced this corruption. We saw other candidates in southern Texas, especially in a county named Frio County. Frio County
Yeah.
is where 15 Democrat leaders were arrested for election fraud. 15 of them. The county judge, the comptroller, every guy in power that was a Democrat was arrested there. It was ridiculous. And it's funny that we bring that up because in the Jay Furman case, we saw that the county
Yeah.
judge was a big part of the election fraud that happened in his election. So I wonder what's going to happen with that. But it's interesting to see, action being finally taken by the Texas Attorney General. I believe his name is what, Keith Paxton.
Yeah.
Uh,
Ken Paxton.
yeah, he's a wonderful guy. Truly, the funny thing is though that many Democrat leaders on the national level were very against his actions in taking raids and search warrants into these Democrat leaders' homes. They thought it was overreaching power until they actually arrested them for election fraud. Then they became silent. So this is a huge case that's still unfolding, but the national media decided not to cover it. So I thought I would write about it. But Ofer, what are your thoughts? Because this is not the first time we have seen that in rural America there has been cases of election fraud that have been overreaching. And I wanted to hear your thoughts on if this is an issue just in Texas or just all around rural America.
No, it's a problem everywhere in rural counties. And I actually want to know more about what they were arrested for, so I'll ask you about that afterwards. But just as a general like heuristic, I'm aware of the fact that after we talked to Jay Furman and in many other cases in rural areas, it's so much easier to dominate a rural community if you come in from the outside as like a carpetbagger, you come in with a lot of money and you have enough to then dole it out for media appearances and ads and everything,
Yeah.
and you're able to dominate the political scene, and then you just have business interests that are competing and you don't necessarily care about the local residents over there. That happens in a lot of areas. It could happen in upstate New York, for example, in rural areas in relation to the cities. So yeah, it's certainly a serious concern. And in relation to Texas specifically, the main hubs of this, like the entire state are like Houston, Dallas, Austin, etc., Fort Worth, and then southern Texas near the border with Mexico. I know it's sort of like trite to mention it, but it's sort of like the Wild West. That's how it sort of manifests itself. Yeah.
El Paso.
And El Paso, yeah, that entire region is basically the Wild West in relation. And then you look at what's going on now with the situation in redistricting, and it's hilarious. Like, dude, they have these 13 members of the state house that just job because they don't want to get a quorum for the House panel. And they're scared that the redistricting will pass and that the Democrats will obviously then lose a couple of seats, 2 or 3 seats. And now it's gotten to a point where Ken Paxton is requesting that the FBI help actually have enough people to vote on the redistricting. So that's just hilarious. And I don't understand how it's even like possible in a civilized like democracy that people
This
are able
is
to flee like that.
Yeah, this is the definition of interfering with an election or a voting thing. Like if you had to see, like you thought January 6th was bad, this is like 100% worse. You
Yeah.
as a state representative are fleeing your country or your state to another state because you don't want to vote on a bill because you're scared it will pass. Like what? This is like ridiculous. And the funny thing that I also uncovered this weekend in another article that didn't do nearly as well as any of the good ones. But this article uncovered that in 1990, the Democrats, when they last had control in Texas, did the exact same redistricting thing that the Republicans are trying to do now. However, it was much worse. It was so bad that the Supreme Court ruled that their redistricting was unconstitutional because it was gerrymandering based on racial prejudice. And that's
Yeah.
where Bush versus Vera came from, which is one of the biggest redistricting cases ever. So I find it very ironic. And there's several senators who are still sitting in the Texas House of Reps today who were there, who voted for that bill that was clearly racially gerrymandering. So I mean, the hypocrisy is huge here. And look, in personal, my opinion, I hate redistricting. When it is for partisan gain, I think it's
Yeah.
needed. We have to obviously have redistricting. There should be more rules for it. But if the Democrats do it, the Republicans are going to do it too. And the Democrats do it much worse than the Republicans do it. Look at, let's say, Northeast. In the Northeast, we have barely any Republican seats because it's all
Yeah.
redistricted counties. Look at New York, for example. New York would have been had much more congressional seats that were red if the redistricting was not done the way it should have, or was not done the way it was. Even in my own region where Oprah used to live, Representative Tom Suozzi, he would not be in power if redistricting didn't occur because New York Democrats decided to redistrict this district into increasing the percentage of queens we have here, which is obviously a left-leaning progressive area. So all of these things kind of show that redistricting is bipartisan. It's ridiculous. I don't think it should be done, but we can't say that one party does it and one party doesn't. All of them do it.
Yeah.
All of them do it very badly, and you definitely shouldn't be fleeing your state to another state because you're scared to vote on a bill. That is not democratic.
Yeah, I completely agree because like it's not just stopping the voting on and there has to be votes and discussions about disaster relief and all that stuff. So that's absolutely heinous when you look at the details.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. You're completely right about what you said about how it crosses party lines, this idea of gerrymandering, because obviously they're going to try to do everything to increase the amount of House seats they have. It's a problem because what they do, and this is something that the Republicans do specifically, the Democrats do other things. The Republicans, they try to chip away at the perimeter of a city and then try to connect it to like a rural area or
Mhm.
suburban area. So then that way the city it's split up, so it can't like get more power, and it's within the same district as an area that's more Republican. So then that way you're able to basically decrease the leverage of the Democrat areas, and the Democrats, by contrast, they connect two cities together with a like a really long line. That's what happens in Illinois, for instance. It looks like a salamander, basically. So that's the thing, and both sides are guilty of it. I actually think Republicans are slightly more guilty when you look at like the states that are listed, like Florida, Ohio, like they're
Well,
all
they
like,
need it more. Yeah, Republicans
yeah,
obviously need more because they count on rural areas more than they do on big cities, so they
yeah,
have to balance it out. Democrats, though, are just as guilty. I mean, maybe not just as guilty, I don't know, but
they have no leg to stand on though. Like they're
yeah.
completely hypocritical.
Yeah, like there's no guy who does it more than the other in my perspective. Look, there it's horrible. I want to see some House legislation passed though, to prevent gerrymandering in the future. To this extent, gerrymandering, as I mentioned before, is necessary. It's how we balance our districts. Because if we don't have any redistricting, then we will have a district with, I don't know, 6,000 people in it
Yeah,
and another district with 500 times that. So
yeah,
that's obviously not feasible. We need to balance it. But I don't know. I want to see legislation passed. The Supreme Court mandated that states redistrict every 10 years. Uh, that's fine. But you're also allowed to do it less. That's why Kathy Hochul said, "Oh, Texas is breaking the law." They're not breaking any law. That's completely false. There's no law that says you can do it less than every 10 years. That would be unfair. That would be just, crazy. Now we see these liberal districts, even California, spending like millions of dollars to redistrict their own districts and threatening that because of what Texas is doing. I don't know. All of this is, in my opinion, crazy. I want to see, though, something come out of this. I want to see that the Democrats in Texas, the House reps in Texas actually lose their power. I don't want this to happen for no reason, okay? So um,
yeah,
hopefully something comes out of it. Hopefully people like Henry Cuellar, who we discuss a lot on this show, is finally gets a seat taken away. But we never know.
yeah.
But I think it's time to move on to a very interesting topic that both Ofer and I are very eager to discuss, and that is Nancy Pelosi's insider trading. So if you were watching the news, if you were watching on Truth Social or X, you know that Donald Trump has been commenting all over about Nancy Pelosi's insider trading. I want to get your initial thoughts on it, and then let's go more into details of why this actually happens and who is guilty of it.
Yeah. I thought it was hilarious because look at Nancy Pelosi's husband, for instance. The amount of like year-on-year yield that he has is insane. Like that's really impressive. Even though
Three
he's a venture
times, tripled
capitalist.
his S&P
Yeah,
500
yeah.
and three
Like,
times.
okay, so performing three times better than the S&P 500, you have to be like an this. And come on, just using Occam's razor, like just, it would make more sense that Nancy Pelosi, who was a Speaker of the House for many years, she got confidential information and then shared it with her husband whenever it was necessary. And that's likely how he was able to time the market and make huge returns. So there's actually one incident that was especially glaring because the companies Visa and Google, and
Yeah.
I think it was also Microsoft, they testified sometime in 2021, and Nancy Pelosi knew about it beforehand. And then magically, your husband invested in those companies and made a huge return right beforehand. So that's a classic textbook case of insider trading. And yeah, this is something that happens with a lot of representatives on all sides, both their own personal trading. Marjorie Taylor Greene does it a lot. You look at her trades,
Oh,
and then
she's
you
like
look,
worth $200 million, right? It's like,
yeah, she has her own construction company, but she also does like these crazy trades. Like I see about it a lot. She puts money into a defense contractor, for instance, or like a tech company right before it blows up. So it's very clear that she has some sort of backdoor knowledge as well. Mark Wayne Mullen, a Republican, also does it. Thomas Wazee, I saw that you mentioned him, I think, on
oh,
one of your
he's
articles. He also
insane.
does it.
He's actually the biggest schmuck in the world. Look, this guy, he's the representative of my district. I never knew anything about his insider trading things at all. I had never heard of it. To my knowledge, he was a moderate Democrat, like in general, a good guy. Like he's not like the worst Democrat ever. He was reasonable. Then I look into this insider trading thing when I'm writing an article about it this weekend, and I see his name popping up anywhere, everywhere. I'm like, what the hell is going on? Turns out he
Yeah,
traded like over 40 what is it called? Um
securities maybe.
no. What is it called when I do something with you? Transactions.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Over 40 transactions in the stock market, totaling over $4.2 million, some crazy amount
yeah.
like that, that were
Wow.
completely unreported. And the rule is for the House is that you have to report them under the Stock Act of 2012, which basically enforces all congressional staff, all congressional representatives, their family members to report all of the trade deals. He
Yeah,
didn't report 42 transactions. 42. I mean, how does
that's
that
insane.
happen? How does that, like, what you forget? Well, so what happened was that he was found to be knowfully, like the committee um agreed that okay, he more likely than not knowingly did not report these transactions. But then,
Hmm.
because the House was Democrat controlled during that time, he was not charged with a penalty or anything. And the ridiculous part of this all under the Stock Act, if you're a first-time offender, no matter if the transactions total up to like $1 billion, it doesn't matter. Guess how much your fine is?
200?
$200. I mean,
Oh my
come on.
God.
Like, are you kidding me? Like, that's your fine. And it doesn't go much higher. Like, it
Yeah.
just, it's like there has never been a case where it got over like I don't, at least I can't think of one that it has gotten significantly over like $1,000. I mean,
Yeah.
this is ridiculous. And it's not even enforced. So clearly there's a big issue here. And clearly everyone here is doing insider trading. It's not the
Yeah.
Democrats. I'm just pointing out the Democrats because they have the most ridiculous cases. But the Republicans do
Mhm.
it too. In the House and in the Senate, I blame everyone. And there needs to be much
Yeah.
more strict legislation. But unfortunately, though, that legislation I don't believe is ever going to pass because the same people that are doing the insider trading are making that legislation. So
Yeah.
what is going to happen? We see Nancy Pelosi when there was actually a deal to make the Stock Act of 2012 much more permeable and much more like realistic to increase the fine and everything. She didn't want to do it. I
Yeah.
don't know why she didn't want to
Wonder
do it,
why.
but I
Yeah.
can't think of a reason. But she refused. She said she would not be in support of that, which she said that the fine was more than enough. Uh, I'm sure for her, $200 really hurt her pockets. But I mean,
Yeah.
this is like comedy. I mean, we're having politicians steal money, and look, in my perspective, there is a thing like when you're a politician, you're going to be rich. Everyone knows that. But why is that the case? It's because you steal money from people. And if, let's say, this happened in the corporate setting on Wall Street or anything, people would
Yeah.
be in jail for lifelong sentences for doing the exact same thing, even half the price of this. And so why aren't we doing anything about this? It's ridiculous. I mean, it's like the law doesn't apply for the House. That's basically what we're showing. So under the Trump administration, this
Yeah.
should be a very big stronghold. DOJ should prosecute any House member that is found of insider trading. They have the resources to do it. They can do it. I want to see Pam Bondi do it. I know she's a person that would be willing to do it out of everyone. So why not actually take action? But look, this is by far the biggest corruption scandal in our government as a whole. Like everyone does it. It's not only the Democrats, it's not only the Republicans, it's every single person in the House, in the Senate. I could guarantee they have some sort of election mishap there. But Ofer, I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you, what do you think needs to be done? Because we're talking about, oh, something should be done, but what can we do about it? Because at the end of the day, the House is the people who decide what laws get passed and what laws don't.
Yeah, that's the problem that you have to go through the house in order to put restrictions on the house. So good luck doing that. Good luck making them willingly like volunteer to restrict the amount of money they can make. But if we're looking at like two routes of solutions, one would be reform and one would be complete abolition. So if you're doing reform, then you could say, for instance, okay, instead of 45 days to report on your transaction, it has to be 1 day, 24 hours, and there has to be very like strict security and like they keep track of everything in a public database so everybody could
Or
like look
no,
through.
this is what
Yeah.
people on Wall Street have to do. Uh, just you have to be reporting and you have to have a transaction reported before you have to have it approved. You can't report on it before you actually have the transaction take place. I mean, that seems like common sense to me. I don't know about you, Over, but
Yeah, I like that too. Yeah, obviously. Anything that would make it harder for them to game the system, and then they have to put it in a public database so people their trades, so I want to know about it. But besides that, you could also increase the fines substantially because it shouldn't be based on a fixed number. It should be based on a percentage, I think,
yeah.
because that way, if you make like a crazy amount of gains in high yield, then obviously a $200 fine or even a couple thousand is not going to affect you that much. People are making hundreds of thousands of dollars
Yeah.
in profits off of this, off of unrealized capital gains. So that's one thing. And then Josh Hawley, he introduced a bill to completely ban any stock trading for any member of Congress, which is the
I
more radical route.
Yeah, like in my perspective at least, like we're trying to make stock trading at least the kind of the way that the US makes money in general. I would be very against banning all House members to trade stocks. Look, I think that they have the ability, and they should have the ability to make money. Their job is huge. They commit their entire life to public service. I respect that, but we should have them make stock trades. They should be allowed to. But very simply, they should just have the same restrictions as people on Wall Street have, for example.
Yeah,
It's the same
yeah,
thing because they look how the US works is that the people who control the money are the richest. And that is a problem. That is what corruption is. The people who control the money are the people on Wall Street who deal with all the money, are the people in government. Those people are always the richest. Those are the richest jobs, the people on Wall Street and in money. So if we have restrictions on the people of Wall Street, we need restrictions on the people in government. It's common sense. I mean, it doesn't take
yeah.
that genius. And when we have whatever Jamal Bodwin or whatever his name is worth 200 million crazy freaking dollars, when we have like absolute douchebags like him worth a crazy amount of money, there's obviously something wrong with our system. So, I mean, this is common sense, but just thinking about it, at least give them the same restrictions as the people on Wall
Yeah.
Street. Like that's, and you bring up a good point, Josh Hawley, in general, just to bring my perspective on him, he's a very politically, media personality. How do I say it?
He does things for the cameras, you're
He
saying?
does things for the cameras, exactly. I think everyone understands that. He's a little bit, he's smart. I think he's a bit
He
smart,
is, yeah.
but he does a lot for the cameras. So I don't know if he would ever actually do that radically, but to an extent he is right in that there are his idea behind the bill to cancel all stock trades, that idea is right, that there is a significant issue. So I would be not opposed to changing it a little bit, but definitely significant restrictions. I agree with that part. Now, Ofer, let's move on to the real topic, the topic that is all over the news. We have all
Yeah.
seen it in the greatest state in the world, Alaska.
I love Alaska. So yeah, it's the best
I
state.
I look, I don't know if I shared with you, but I actually visited Alaska. It's
Oh wow.
beautiful. It's by
Yeah.
far the best place I ever visited, by far, not even
Hmm.
comparable to anything. But over what is going on there? Why is it so important that this state with like a million people living in it is so all over the news? What is going on?
Well, because on August 15th, there's supposed to be a meeting, a summit between Putin and Trump. They're going to meet in Anchorage. That's what I'm understanding. And it's going to be the first time they talk directly face to face in 6 years. And it's the first time that a president
I
talks
can't
with
believe the
the Russian
pictures. The
president
pictures are gonna
for
be,
4 years. Yeah.
that
The
is gonna be
pictures are going to be legendary. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we'll. I want to be like I want to show my reaction to those pictures when it comes to place. It's going to be
Yeah. Yeah.
Friday of this week, I hope.
Friday. Yeah.
And when Ofer obviously is taking a trip later, that is the 16th, right?
Yeah. On the 16th.
So we may be filming. We may be filming on Friday.
Yeah.
If that
Yeah.
works out, that would
I'll give
be
my
insane.
thoughts.
Yeah, that would be absolutely like crazy. But look, in reality though, this like in my understanding is one of the biggest things that ever happened since the start of the Ukraine and Russia war. It's the biggest show that Putin is actually willing to negotiate. And why would that be? Clearly he's winning. Clearly his country is not suffering as much as it should be and for starting the war and well, let me rephrase. Clearly, the country is not suffering from the war
Yeah.
as much as we all expected it to be. But why would he be willing to negotiate? What is he asking for the state of Alaska from Trump? Is he trying to buy it back? Like, what is going on?
So the reason why he's doing it is because it doesn't cost anything to fly to Alaska to meet with him. That's not actually a loss for Russia. So Putin, he's been essentially employing the strategy where he continues the war, continues with this attritional state where they're making incremental gains every single day, and he tries to push back America's talk of getting to the negotiating table, getting to peace for as long as possible, up until there's a point where Trump becomes irate and he demands that Putin take some sort of practical measure to prove that he's actually getting closer to it. And that's why Putin's willing to agree to things that are good rhetorically, like meetings in Istanbul, which is something that happened a couple of months ago, or meeting with Trump as it's going to happen, or even something more practical, like agreeing to a ceasefire in the air or in the sea or energy strikes pausing, that sort of stuff. But overall, his main objective still remains the same because in June of 2024, he laid out his demands for an end to the war. And even those ones are sort of flimsy, in my opinion, because I think he sort of knows it's going to be rejected out of hand, so then he could get more out of it in the long term. But he demands on paper annexation of the four regions that Donetsk and Luhansk. He also demands neutrality, no Ukrainian participation in NATO, and then this very ambiguous term of demilitarization and denazification. That's what he calls it, which is like a very flexible term. Like it could be really derived of anything. You can make of it whatever you want. So that doesn't really matter that much. But those are his demands. And those demands are non-starters for Ukraine because Ukraine does not want to withdraw from areas that it still is fighting in and lose control of its defense lines over there. So he knows they're going to say no to the proposal that is going to be agreed upon between Witkoff, Trump, and Putin. And the deal that Witkoff presented when he flew a couple of days ago to Russia was that, okay, we're going to freeze the current front lines in Kherson and Zaporozhye. So those are two regions. And then in the one region where the Ukrainians still have like a pretty sizable amount of territory in Donetsk, they're going to withdraw fully from it and the Russian forces will take it over. The Ukrainians, on their part, everybody knows they're not going to agree to it. Zelensky said as much already. So Putin could show that he's receptive to peace by going and talking to Trump directly. And at the same time, he's able to, if something ends up working, get control over it, but I don't think it will. And then he's able to frame Ukraine as being the party that's not willing to compromise, which it would be. It wouldn't be willing to do so in that case. So either way, regardless of what happens, Putin is able to frame it in such a way that is significant for it. And Ukraine, even if it agreed to the deal, it would not have security guarantees, and then the war can continue at a later date. So basically, I'm just very skeptical of the results that can be produced. I don't think that it's going to lead to much. And I think that eventually what it will mean is that Putin's going to frame himself as being willing to do something. And then if it doesn't happen, he could sort of push the blame onto Ukraine.
Yeah.
Trump, for his part, I think he's still going to supply Ukraine, but maybe he won't do as much as he would have demanded beforehand because we know he put a deadline and said, okay, you have up until August 8th. And if you're not receptive to peace, then I'll give them long range missiles. I'll let them strike all these various rear bases and refineries. I'll put secondary tariffs on India, China, etc. I'll target your oil vessels that are going to Europe and selling them gas under the table. So all those things scare Putin, and obviously he wants to do everything to just make Trump
Yeah.
forget about it while still keeping the war going, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
If I think it's clear that if India, for example, stops buying oil or Russia, China stops buying oil from Russia, it's going to create a big issue for Russia. I
Yeah.
think that's what they're scared of
Mhm.
too. But over there has been a lot of talk on the fact that in earlier in the war, on the fact that Russia will have an issue with gaining soldiers to fight in the war for Ukraine. Obviously, that is not the case. Russia has had absolutely no issues in the last few months gaining soldiers to fight for the war, and why is that? Like, who did they find to fight for them?
They had one round, only one round of mobilization to go to the war, and that was in 2022 after Ukraine conducted two major counteroffensives. Since then, it's only been based on obviously the yearly recruitment cycle for young men that are in their late teens or early 20s, which is natural. That always happens. So that's a conventional army. And then there are also volunteers. Volunteers go because it gives them benefits if they're alive, and even if they die, they get like a pretty good pension fund that goes to their families. So
Yeah,
that's an incentive for people that are like in an economically unstable situation to just go there and take their luck, and hopefully
exactly.
that works out for them.
Y-
And they also do obviously recruit to a certain degree. It's not a major component, but they are also do bring in migrants from other countries, foreign workers from Central Asia, Africa. I've seen all of them fighting over there, but it's mainly from volunteers, and it's about
Yep.
30,000 per month, which is a lot. It's a huge number.
And a lot of these volunteers who live in rural areas, who their
Yeah,
economic standpoint, uh, like the money that the military gives them is huge compared to anything that they would ever met.
yeah,
Like huge, like you won the lottery. So it's understandable why they would go into it. But yeah, in general, the situation in Ukraine, I would love to discuss it more. But look,
yeah,
unfortunately, this podcast has to be cut short.
yeah,
But thank you all for so much for filming today, and obviously we are excited both for our upcoming episodes coming up very, very shortly. Obviously we'll start posting more and more often as possible. Uh, and yeah, just thank you to all our new audience. We got a very big boost this
yeah.
week. It's wonderful. So thank you, Ofer.
Thanks you so much, guys, for the recent support. It's just like amazing seeing that video get to 10K views. So I'm very excited about
Yeah,
it.
yeah, but we'll get another boost. Don't worry, guys. Thank you so much. And yeah, I'll see you next time on the Patriot Perspective.